The 10,114th meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is maintenance of international peace and security, energy, critical minerals, and security. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo, Undersecretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of Item 2 of the agenda. I now give the floor to Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo.
Mr. President, I thank the United States for convening this meeting on an issue of tremendous importance. Critical minerals are among the main drivers of the 21st century economy. Countless things we take for granted, smartphones, electric vehicles, and cutting-edge medical technologies would not be possible without them. A decade ago, minerals such as lithium, cobalt, and nickel had limited strategic importance. Today, they underpin the technologies powering the digital economy and the energy transition. In 2023 alone, the trade in raw and semi-processed minerals reached approximately $2.5 trillion. This represents more than 10% of global trade. Demand could triple by 2030 and quadruple by 2040. This dramatic rise in demand is a generational opportunity to create jobs, diversify economies, and promote sustainable development. However, the surge in demand for critical minerals is also fueling geopolitical competition and affecting global supply chains. Mining for these minerals has been linked to human rights abuses and environmental degradation. It's incumbent on both producing and consuming countries to enact governance and regulatory frameworks to manage these resources responsibly for the benefit of all. Mr. President, the opportunities and risks critical minerals represent are especially stark in the case of conflict-affected states. The mining of these minerals is geographically concentrated. A number of countries and regions affected by conflict are major producers. More than 70% of global cobalt extraction, for example, occurs in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Most of the batteries that power our smart devices rely on this material. Myanmar is one of the world's largest sources of rare earth elements, essential for high-performance magnets used in advanced electronics. And Ukraine holds significant reserves of titanium and lithium, indispensable for aerospace technologies and advanced manufacturing. In conflict-affected contexts, mining, when not managed responsibly, can have a devastating effect. It can weaken governance, spur illicit economies, and fund criminal and armed groups. The Security Council has recognized the link between national resources and conflict. In several settings, it has imposed targeted measures, including sanctions, to stop the illicit trade of specific commodities and prevent the fueling of conflict. The panels of experts supporting these sanctions regimes have helped identify violations, trace supply chains, and strengthen the implementation of measures to curb illicit exploitation and trade. Their work has yielded a wealth of knowledge and analysis on the broader phenomenon of how illicit resource extraction supports armed groups and sustains conflict economies. The Council has, for example, established sanctions regimes in relation to the situations in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Libya, and imposed restrictions on al-Shabaab. The Council has also requested UN peace operations to work with national governments to help curb illegal exploitation of natural resources by armed groups. The Great Lakes region is a case in point. In the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo, control over mineral-rich areas is a major driver of violence and shapes regional political dynamics. Since the start of the current crisis in the area, the AFC M23 coalition has reportedly earned more than $1 million a month from illicit mining and smuggling. UN peacekeepers in the country are working with Congolese authorities and regional partners to reduce armed group influence over mining areas and disrupt illicit mineral supply chains. To complement these actions, the Secretary General's Special Envoy for the Great Lakes region is supporting efforts to address illicit resource extraction. He has worked with the International Conference on the Great Lakes region and the Kimberley process to enhance traceability, strengthen compliance mechanisms, and reinforce shared governance of natural resources. Mr. President, we see 3 priorities to help conflict-affected countries realize the potential presented by critical minerals. First, the extraction of these resources must deliver just and equitable outcomes. Across the United Nations system, we are working closely with national authorities to help them strengthen institutions that manage their national resources, enhance their regulatory frameworks, and maximize their peace-building benefits. We help governments strengthen their ability to negotiate fair mining agreements, build domestic capacity for processing and refinement, and mitigate any adverse effects of mining. Second, we need multilateral and regional action to strengthen governance, improve the traceability of minerals to curb illicit flows, and build more resilient supply chains. Dialogue between producing and consuming countries, as well as with industry and regional organizations, is necessary. And third, we must deploy our peacemaking instruments to mitigate and resolve natural resource disputes. Our mediators factor in considerations related to national resources in peace talks. This can help conflict parties identify ways to share benefits and develop cooperative relationships. With this Council's support, we will continue to prioritize diplomacy and create the political space for engagement on these issues. Mr. President, the opportunities ahead of us are significant. The fair and responsible harnessing of critical minerals can help lift hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, and it can help promote peace. Achieving these goals will require concerted action by member states, the private sector, civil society, and the United Nations. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Ms. DiCarlo for her remarks. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as Secretary of Energy of the United States. I want to begin by extending my appreciation and gratitude to the exceptional men and women of the American military. Their commitment and sacrifice safeguard our nation and uphold stability and security around the world. I cannot sit before you today without speaking about the challenges posed by the Iranian regime. For 47 years, this brutal dictatorship has spread chaos, death, and instability around the world, threatening international peace and economic opportunity for so many. It is only fitting that the United States is chairing the Security Council at this moment, because confronting challenges like this requires real leadership. President Trump has been clear on Iran. Iran's brutal regime will not prevail. Together, we have confronted it, and together, we will defeat it. Thank you, Ambassador Waltz, for inviting me to lead today's session of the United Nations Security Council. It is with great pleasure that the United States is leading this crucial conversation about critical minerals, energy, and resources. This topic is not merely economic, it is fundamental to prosperity and peace. That's why I've been clear. We need more energy, not less energy, and we need it now. Without affordable, reliable, and secure energy, nothing works. Energy is life. The absence of energy is poverty, despair, and death. It is how we grow our economies. It is how we innovate, power our daily lives, and secure our nations. Energy provides stability, competitiveness, and opportunities for a better future. In recent years, many governments have adopted aggressive climate policies. These policies, made in the name of climate change, have been unrealistic and poorly planned. The energy delusions implicit in climate policies represent real and growing threats to nations and peoples around the world. If I can elaborate, only 1 billion people today live lives recognizable to anyone in this room. We wear nice clothes, we travel to meetings, we live in climate-controlled buildings, we have access to modern medicine. It's the wonder of the modern world. 7 billion people aspire to the lives we have. The only road from here to there is massively more energy. On the other end of the spectrum, 2 billion people, 1/4 of humanity today, do not have access to clean cooking fuels. They cook and heat their homes the same way all of our ancestors did, burning wood, charcoal, dung, indoors. The indoor air pollution from this alone kills over 2 million people, as estimated by the United Nations Health Agency. These are giant problems, and we can't take our eyes off of them. Ensuring energy abundance means keeping our countries safe. Energy security is national security. Those who have restricted energy supply have, at the end of the day, increased their dependence on unfriendly sources beyond their borders, while displacing their own energy-intensive industries outside of their own borders. We saw what happened 4 years ago when our European friends faced energy problems because they heavily relied on Russian oil and gas. Energy is too important, too central to life to get wrong. And it is the same with critical minerals. Open markets keep the global economy running and reduce the risk of conflict. It is in the security interest of the United States and our allies to not overly depend on any single country for materials critical to our economies and national security. The work we're doing today, especially on the strategic importance of critical minerals and energy, is directly tied to preventing conflict and building a world where countries can cooperate and move forward together. Energy and critical minerals power every sector of our economy and underpin everything in our lives. If a device has a button or it turns on and off, it requires magnets made from rare earth elements and the energy needed to produce them. That's why we need to strengthen our supply chains and increase our access to energy. The United States and our allies are working hard to keep the seas open and our major trade lanes, from the Panama Canal to the Red Sea to the Strait of Hormuz, safe and flowing. Because the world depends on the free movement of energy, minerals, and goods that power our economies and secure our nations. Working together in this way strengthens not only our economies, but our regional and global security, ensuring no nation is left vulnerable and our adversaries cannot take unfair advantage. As President Trump has said, America's foreign policy has two main goals: to ensure prosperity at home and peace abroad. We stand firmly with all nations that believe in and want to promote peace, freedom, democracy, and economic prosperity. We urge every nation to stand with us and our allies to safeguard the world's energy and natural resource supply, keeping it secure, reliable, and affordable, so our shared prosperity cannot be threatened by malign adversaries. I resume my function as President of the Council. I give the floor to the representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Mr. President. And let me also thank Under-Secretary General Di Carlo for her insightful remarks. Secretary Wright, thank you for your presence here today and for shedding light on a topic which greatly affects instability and conflict around the world. Access to critical minerals and energy systems sits at the very heart of international peace and security. These minerals not only enable renewable technologies, digital infrastructure, and modern industry, they're indispensable to the global energy transition, inclusive economic development and growth, and global economic security. How they're managed today will shape whether they strengthen or strain global stability tomorrow. Mr. President, conflict over natural resources is not new. From oil to water to critical minerals, resource pressures have shaped geopolitics for centuries. No region has been immune. However, in recent decades, these challenges have disproportionately impacted Africa, in particular the Great Lakes region, Sudan, and the Sahel. The illicit exploitation of natural resources continues to fuel armed conflict, undermine state authority, and devastate communities across the continent. At the same time, global supply chains, whether for critical minerals or energy exports and infrastructure, have increasingly been weaponized, threatening the prosperity, livelihoods, and well-being of millions and civilians. Allow me to highlight 3 points. First, Mr. President, it is essential that countries rich in natural resources, including critical minerals, fully benefit from their own wealth. Such wealth should drive local economic growth, facilitate economic diversification, and support inclusive peace and sustainable development. To this end, dialogue between governments and local populations, as well as with civil society and the private sector, is essential. Across borders, regional integration also plays a crucial role in harmonizing regulations, enabling the movement of persons and goods, facilitating cross-border infrastructure development, and enhancing cooperation to prevent conflicts linked to resource exploitation. Second, Mr. President, Denmark believes that a key aspect of ensuring global energy security relies on joint efforts to reduce strategic dependencies on dominant suppliers and bolstering energy autonomy. Similarly, we oppose critical minerals being used as a tool of economic coercion. Collective action, through international partnerships and trade agreements, is therefore essential to ensure dependable and stable supply chains. For our part, Denmark focuses on supply chain resilience in line with the EU's Critical Raw Materials Act, which focuses on minerals vital for the twin transition. We also see the green transition as crucial to building energy security and reducing possible competition. To this end, Denmark is working to ensure secure long-term and renewable energy and clean technology sources. Third, Mr. President, energy infrastructure remains a critical part of civilian infrastructure. Attacks on power grids and pipelines disrupt economies, undermine public services, and impede the provision of basic humanitarian needs. We're seeing this unfold in many parts of the world, including in the Middle East and Africa. And for 4 years now, we have witnessed in Ukraine how Russian attacks on critical energy infrastructure have had devastating humanitarian consequences for the civilian population. Civilian infrastructure must be protected in accordance with international humanitarian law. Further, it must be made more resilient to both conflict-related and climate-related risks. Mr. President, in closing, natural resources have long shaped the dynamics of conflict. Around the world, we are seeing that these stakes are rising once again. At the United Nations, and in particular around this table, we have a shared responsibility to ensure that these resources become a foundation for progress and peace, not a source of division. That means supporting responsible and sustainable natural resource management. It means equitable benefit sharing and the protection of energy infrastructure. In short, it means prioritizing cooperation over conflict. Denmark stands ready to support all efforts to that end. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Denmark for that statement. I give the floor to the representative of Bahrain.
شكرا سيد الرئيس.
Thank you, Mr. President. I welcome the Secretary of Energy of the United States, and I thank Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo for her valuable briefing. I would also like to thank the United States of America for holding this meeting, which sheds light on the growing relationship between energy and critical minerals and its immediate impact on international peace and security. Critical minerals are a key pillar for building modern economy and promoting states' capacities in different strategic fields based on which economic and technological modern transitions happen in order to reach energy security and strategic industry. Competition over these minerals has become a geopolitical and economic intertwined issue. This is why the international community must ensure that critical minerals promote stability and development and not become a reason for tension or conflict. In this vein, we stress the need for promoting the principles of a sustainable and responsible management of natural resources while promoting transparency and international cooperation when managing supply chains to limit monopoly, politicization, or impeding markets in order to reach safe, sustainable, and affordable global markets. Based on our commitment to the promotion of energy security and stability of supply chains, we stress that we have engaged in a number of international and regional relevant agreements and initiatives, and we signed a number of bilateral agreements to promote cooperation, latest of which an agreement for cooperation on critical minerals with the United States. We also stress the vital role of the International Authority for the International Seabed Authority, which was established based on the UN Convention for the Law of the Sea in regulating critical minerals in the seabed and in areas outside national jurisdiction. It provides a legal framework that ensures balance between peaceful use and sustainable use of maritime minerals and protecting the environment. Energy security and supply chains are immediately linked to the safety of international corridors and vital infrastructure. We note the statement by the GCC Council of Ministers, which strongly condemned the Iranian aggression, which is unjustified, that targeted the countries of the GCC and a number of other sisterly Arab countries. It stressed the need for the immediate halt of these attacks to ensure the return of security and stability and peace to the region. It also stressed the importance of ensuring the aerial and maritime safety of the region in order to ensure that supply chains and international energy markets remain stable. Mr. President, Iran continues its destabilizing acts around the world. They are threatening the freedom of navigation. They are threatening critical energy infrastructure. They have targeted critical infrastructure in my country and in our region. Security Council resolutions, especially Resolution 552 of 1984, strongly condemned attacks on commercial ships, and they stressed the need to ensure international navigation security. This is in line with the international law, including the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. Any attempt to jeopardize navigation in the Hormuz Strait will lead to an increase in energy prices. It will increase competitiveness and negatively affect international economies. In conclusion, Mr. President, we call upon the international community to condemn such attacks and denounce them strongly, because they have very dangerous repercussions on international and regional peace. We urge for the promotion of international cooperation to protect critical corridors and strategic infrastructure. We also stress our support for the promotion of international law principles and the respect of the sovereignty of states. This is very important to prevent any escalation and to protect international and regional peace. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Bahrain for that statement. I give the floor to the representative from Greece.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to commend the Presidency for convening this timely meeting and thank the U.S. Secretary of State for chairing it. Your participation here today, Mr. Secretary, shows the importance you attach to this subject. I would like to thank also the USG Ms. DiCarlo for her briefing today. Mr. President, allow me to emphasize the following 3 points. First, in an era of geopolitical strains, technological transformation, and climate change, countries around the globe are facing challenges in their access to affordable energy. The diversification of energy sources, gas, oil, critical minerals, and energy supply can lead to energy autonomy and thus energy security and economic stability. Secure, reliable, affordable, and sustainable access to all fuel and energy sources is vital. Maritime security is of equal importance, as a secure maritime domain is essential for the safety of global supply chains, energy security, and economic stability, including price stability. The disruption of key maritime routes can also raise costs and cause greater environmental impact. Mr. President, in the midst of rapidly changing energy dynamics, Greece emerges as a valuable transit country for European markets by providing diversified energy sources and routes. Our main goal is to enhance energy security through multiple, alternative, cost-efficient, and competitive energy interconnections. Greece aims to become both an energy hub and a key transit country, starting with natural gas and electricity. In Europe, after Russia's aggression against Ukraine, reducing reliance on Russian energy has been key, and Greece has been contributing to this end, including through the vertical corridor. Second, we stand firmly behind the EU's drive for strategic autonomy in energy, reducing its dependency on single sources, and is poised to play a pivotal role in the EU's endeavor on diversifying and building resilient supply chains. This also highlights the importance of developing secure, diversified, and sustainable connectivity corridors, including initiatives such as the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor, which can facilitate the safe and reliable transport of energy resources and critical minerals across the regions. Third, the global race for critical minerals presents a complex mix of opportunities and risks, impacting the geopolitical landscape and security around the world. Critical minerals and their undisrupted supplies are equally vital for the global transition to clean energy technologies and technological advancements such as renewable energy sources like solar and wind power, electric vehicles, and others. However, their extraction and trade, if not managed well with transparency and accountability, can fuel existing conflicts and trigger new ones. Thus, systematic illicit exploitation and trafficking of critical minerals, wherever these occur, can exacerbate inequalities, insecurity, instability, and can threaten the sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity of several states in the world. As a country with mineral resources, reserves, and significant extraction and processing capability, we are determined to build further on our geological endowment through our robust national program for critical raw materials research. Mr. President, we stand ready to coordinate and cooperate with other member states, sectors, and institutions in order to address today's challenges on all the above sectors. This, in order to ensure energy security, minimize vulnerabilities and risks, consolidate economic stability, growth and development, and hopefully contribute to international prosperity, peace, and security. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Greece for that statement. I give the floor to the representative of France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President. I'd like to thank USG, Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo, for her briefing. I also wish to thank the U.S. Presidency and you, Secretary of Energy, for inviting the Security Council to consider the challenges thrown up by energy and critical minerals. Mr. President, a few months ago, we had an ARIA Formula meeting organized on the initiative of Sierra Leone. It served as an opportunity to begin considering these issues. It's important for the Security Council to remain seized of these issues, given that they pose threats to international peace and security. Competition for control over these resources is indeed a driver of conflict and instability. It is also a source of revenues which fuels said conflicts and instability. We've seen this in Africa, where the continent's vast wealth is being preyed on by armed groups, which are exploiting these resources to fund their activities. They're also organizing the pillage of these resources for the benefit of powers outside the continent. Now, this resource grab by armed groups is feeding violence, prolonging conflicts, and perpetuating the suffering of civilians. This is the case in the east of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where the M23 controls between 15 and 30% of global coltan production. And this is how the M23 is funding its expansion. In the longer term, this plunder undermines the economic and social development of states who are deprived of the wealth contained in their own soil. Mr. President, energy is also being used for coercion as a weapon in conflicts. In its war of aggression on Ukraine, which is now in its 5th year, Russia has resorted to indiscriminate strikes against the electricity grid and the energy infrastructure of Ukraine, deliberately trying to provoke a humanitarian crisis, and this at the height of winter. Russia is also seeking to get control over Ukrainian energy infrastructure through its illegal and irresponsible occupation of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. We reiterate Ukraine's full and comprehensive sovereignty over and ownership of the ZNPP, as well as the rest of its territory. We once again call on Russia to stop threatening the security and safety of this nuclear power plant, as well as to hand control over to Ukraine with full respect for its sovereignty. Moving beyond that, the issue of supply security means the resilience of our economies is at stake. This resilience depends on decarbonized energy sources and critical minerals, which are needed to undertake the green transition for industrialization and the digital transformation. We're disquieted by the development of unfair practices in critical minerals, such as market manipulation aimed at disrupting supply, the organization of shortages, so as to undermine development projects aimed at diversifying global value chains. Such practices can undermine the stability of our economies and even our security interests. Now, in order to tackle these challenges together, I wish to suggest a few ways forward. First, we need to ensure equitable and sustainable exploitation of energy resources and critical minerals within the framework of balanced partnerships and with full respect for the sovereignty of states, states who should be able to harness their wealth for their own development. This requires making the private sector accountable, which must ensure the traceability of critical minerals and should not use plundered minerals in its supply chains. France would like to lend its support to the implementation of a European regulation which establishes due diligence obligations for conflict-affected minerals and critical metals. Thus, in 2021, France joined the European Partnership for Responsible Minerals, the EPRM, which brings together European states, companies, and civil society organizations, which together are funding and monitoring development projects. Development action that's ambitious and designed with the private sector is vital to help mineral-rich producer countries to climb up the value chain, ensuring that the social and environmental impacts thereof are limited and to bolster their autonomy. France wishes to also support the involvement of multilateral development institutions in the energy sector, including in nuclear power, so as to address large-scale electrification challenges of developing countries. Second, efforts are necessary to continue ensuring energy autonomy through a diversified, decarbonized energy mix, which includes civilian nuclear power. France intends to be the driver in this sphere. In Paris, on the 10th of March of this year, we will be hosting a global summit on nuclear power in close cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA. Now, this summit will be an opportunity to make headway towards tripling installed civilian nuclear capacity. This is an objective that France supports and which was announced at the UNFCCC conference in Dubai in 2023. Lastly, it's important when it comes to critical minerals to establish secure, sustainable, resilient, and diversified supply chains, guaranteeing economic stability and reducing the risks of international tensions. To that end, the French chairmanship of the G7 will be committed to implementing the plan of action and the roadmap on critical minerals, both of which were adopted last year in Kananaskis. We must work with producer countries and the private sector so as to implement diversified supply chains underpinned by transparent market mechanisms and responsible mining practices so as to promote prosperity and security for all. I thank you.
I thank the representative of France for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President, at the outset, I would like to take this opportunity to commend your presence among us in your capacity as the Secretary of Energy of the United States of America, and I would also like to thank Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo, Under-Secretary General, for her briefing. Mr. President, in a world in the midst of an energy and digital transition, and at a time when the race for strategic minerals is accelerating, the Democratic Republic of the Congo can only support the initiative taken by the United States of America to put on the Security Council's agenda a subject which, for us, is of particularly existential importance. As a country with vast reserves of strategic minerals that are essential for modern technologies and for the energy transition, the Democratic Republic of the Congo is at the very heart of this global issue. And yet these resources, which should constitute a powerful lever for development and for the prosperity of our population, have, above all, been coveted, which has contributed to fueling cycles of persistent violence in some regions of our territory. Mr. President, the 21st century is characterized by the emergence of strategic mineral resources, including cobalt, coltan, lithium, gold, and rare earths, which have become essential pillars of the technology and energy transformations of our time. This dynamic also brings with it growing risks for international peace and security. In some fragile contexts, competition for control of natural resources is fueling cycles of violence and contributing to the emergence of a veritable war economy. illegal artisanal mining, informal taxation, and also cross-border smuggling networks are allowing some armed groups to finance their activities and to keep drawn-out conflicts burning on. My country is the perfect illustration of this. For nearly 3 decades, the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of the Congo has remained a theater of persistent violence that is in large part fueled by the illicit exploitation and trade in natural resources. This situation has plunged millions of civilians into chronic insecurity. It has caused mass population displacement and had dealt lasting damage to economic and social structures. And this is also an opportunity for us to thank the United States for the imposition of targeted sanctions on troublemakers in the Great Lakes region, namely the Rwandan Defense Forces and the M23. In certain areas rich in strategic minerals that are essential for the global energy transition and advanced technologies, the civilian population continues to be particularly exposed to violence and abuse. Several reports from United Nations experts have established a direct link between the illegal exploitation of natural resources and the persistence of armed conflicts in this region. Mr. President, beyond this situation, the correlation between natural resources and armed conflicts can be seen in several regions of the world, in some parts of the Sahel, in some parts of the Middle East, and also in some parts of Latin America. Competition for control of strategic resources, be they hydrocarbons, minerals, or other natural riches, continues to fuel tensions and to weaken regional stability. These dynamics are also contributing to cross-border destabilization, including via refugee flows, organized crime, human rights violations, and the militarization of areas rich in natural resources. They show that the governance of natural resources is today a central issue for the maintenance of international peace and security. Mr. President, faced with these challenges, it is essential to promote responsible, transparent, and inclusive governance of mineral resources. It is essential that producing states be able to fully exercise their sovereignty over the resources that come from their subsoils, while also making sure that their exploitation makes a real contribution to the economic and social development of their populations. With this in mind, several priorities should be underscored: strengthening the traceability and transparency of mineral supply chains, promoting the creation of local added value, including through the transformation and processing of minerals within producing countries, and also effectively combating fraud, smuggling, the illegal exploitation of natural resources. Mr. President, the Democratic Republic of the Congo is not addressing this matter solely from a rhetorical point of view. We are already actively engaged in several initiatives aimed at strengthening the transparency and governance of natural resources. In this regard, my country is participating in the Kimberley process for the traceability of diamonds and also in the regional certification mechanism established by the International Conference on the Great Lakes region. And that is an application of the OECD due diligence principles for mineral supply chains. These initiatives show that there are already tangible instruments that can promote the responsible exploitation of natural resources, and they could very much serve as an inspiration to strengthen a more coherent and more effective international framework to prevent the use of natural resources in the financing of conflicts. To conclude, Mr. President, it is worth underlining the following. Firstly, the private sector plays an essential role in the mineral industry and in global supply chains. In that regard, their involvement must be done with strict respect for national legislation and for the principles of social and environmental responsibility. Secondly, enterprises operating in this sector must make sure that their activities in no way contribute to the financing of armed groups or to the illegal exploitation of natural resources. They must also contribute to the sustainable development of the countries in which they operate, including through the transfer of technologies, the training of local human resources, and the implementation of community development projects. Third, at a time when the world is engaging in a major energy transformation, it is essential that this transition not reproduce the injustices of the past. And fourth, the energy transition will only be truly sustainable if it is also just, responsible, and beneficial for the peoples of the countries that produce those resources. Lastly, the Democratic Republic of the Congo reaffirms its will to work with all of its partners in order to promote equitable, transparent, and responsible governance of natural resources for the sake of peace, security, and sustainable development. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Democratic Republic of the Congo for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of Panama.
Gracias.
Thank you, Mr. President. Panama welcomes the convening of this session and greets Mr. Chris Wright, Secretary of Energy of the United States, for presiding it. We are grateful to Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo, Under Secretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs of the United Nations, for her valuable contribution. Today, energy security increasingly influences geopolitical dynamics and global economic relations. For decades, competition for critical natural and mineral resources has shaped global trade and international politics. However, while mineral extraction has enabled important technological, medical, and economic advances, it has also generated multidimensional insecurity in certain regions. When communities living in resource-rich territories do not benefit reasonably from the development that these resources generate, inequalities deepen and cycles of violence are fueled through recruitment into armed groups and into criminal and drug trafficking networks. The links between exploitation, smuggling, and the sustaining of armed groups are clear. In some regions, the territorial control exercised by these armed groups goes hand in hand with illegal mining, and the profits from this are often channeled into transnational organized crime. Institutional fragility and regulatory weakness deepen this problem, creating the risks of these mineral resources and their economic benefits being captured and concentrated by political and/or military elites. At the same time, when external actors seek to extract these resources for their own benefit, some even end up fueling polarization and further exacerbating conflicts. Consequently, families are forced to leave their homes in search of better opportunities, generating greater migratory flows. Panama, as a transit country, has sometimes been affected by this irregular migratory flow. That is why we believe it is necessary to address insecurity at its root, which is often caused by a geopolitical competition for critical energy and mineral resources. Mr. President, as a country with extensive experience in logistics and trade, and because of the Panama Canal, the maritime corridor that allows for a significant transit of materials and products, we understand the importance of facilitating and protecting the free and secure and safe flow of the global energy and minerals markets. This flow of supply chains must be governed under international law. It is imperative to comply with the rules of the World Trade Organization and to establish consequences for those actors who facilitate or benefit from illicit energy flows. The same applies to those who, by blocking critical flows, put human security and global trade at risk. Under the equality of international law, the same applies to actors who seek to twist the interpretation of the law or coerce others to satisfy private, commercial interests to the detriment of regional and global development and welfare. Irregular extraction, above all deep-sea mining, causes irreversible damage to the environment, to human health, and to the systems that sustain our life on Earth. Panama, in line with the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea and the instruments, the multilateral instruments derived from it, stresses the importance of an orderly and equitable regime for the extraction of critical minerals in the oceans, with special attention paid to the protection of marine ecosystems. President, as an international community, do we really want to embark on a path of economic development that, although highly profitable for some in the short term, is unsustainable for future generations? The recommendations of the United Nations Panel on Critical Minerals and Energy suggest the need to strengthen global governance to ensure that the energy transition is not built on a foundation of existing inequalities, nor does it reproduce patterns of land dispossession and forced displacement through cycles of violence in the global south. In this regard, the permanent sovereignty of states over their natural resources must be exercised with responsibility, transparency, and strict adherence to national and international standards. Through effective international cooperation, critical minerals can be consolidated as drivers of sustainable development and shared prosperity, rather than as catalysts of instability or conflict. There is an urgent need to strengthen inclusive governance and traceability mechanisms, implement standards, and promote fair trade schemes that ensure proportional benefits for producing countries. The ministerial conference recently held in Washington, D.C., highlighted the centrality of mineral resources for the energy transition. President, advances in science and technology and current market demands require the extraction of minerals. However, it is our responsibility to ensure that the development that does take place is sustainable and people-centered, considering the communities that live where the energy resources are located, including indigenous peoples and other relevant stakeholders. Given the greater interconnection between the energy and critical minerals sectors, it is appropriate to discuss how and to what extent it is possible to regulate extraction activities so that we can achieve a balance between economic development, environmental protection, and social welfare. Thank you.
I want to thank the representative of Panama for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of China.
谢谢主席，我欢迎。
Thank you, President. I welcome Secretary Wright presiding over today's meeting and thank USG DiCarlo for her briefing. At present, as the global energy transition accelerates, emerging technologies such as AI are advancing rapidly, while demand for critical minerals and other resources continues to rise. As the world enters a new period of turbulence and transformation, imbalances in the supply and demand of energy, critical minerals, and other resources are becoming increasingly pronounced. The international community must enhance solidarity and cooperation to jointly foster stable and resilient resource supply and industrial chains, thereby supporting global economic growth. Allow me to make 3 points. First, we must foster an enabling environment for safeguarding supply chain security. Rising global geopolitical tensions and conflicts in resource-rich regions such as the Middle East and Africa are disrupting the production and transportation of energy and critical minerals. China has consistently advocated that all parties abide by the purposes and principles of the UN Charter, refrain from the use or threat of force in international relations, resolve disputes peacefully through dialogue and consultation, safeguard energy and the critical minerals as well as other non-military targets, and ensure the safety and uninterrupted flow of shipping lanes.
The situation in the Middle East is deeply concerning. China urges all parties to immediately cease military actions, refrain from further escalating tensions, and prevent regional instability from adversely affecting the global economy. The international community must collectively support countries, particularly in Africa, in addressing persistent challenges such as mineral-induced instability, curbing the illegal smuggling and mining of critical minerals, and tackling the underlying drivers of armed conflicts. Second, we must fully respect the sovereignty of all nations over their natural resources. In accordance with the principles of international law, each country exercises absolute sovereignty over the resources within its territory and bears primary responsibility for its governance. Certain countries should abandon outdated colonialist thinking, fully respect the development path and policy choices of other countries, and engage in business cooperation based on equality and mutual benefit. They must not, for self-interest, seize resources from other countries through various means, even resorting to military force to exert pressure or coercion. The international community should support developing countries in fully leveraging their resource endowments to foster economic development and improve the well-being of their populations. Developing countries should not be permanently confined to the low end of industrial chains, and the current unfair and unreasonable arrangement must be addressed. Third, we must consistently uphold openness, cooperation, and mutual benefit. The global distribution of energy and critical minerals is highly uneven, making mismatches between resource supply and industrial development demand inevitable. Countries should embrace the concept of building a community of a shared future for mankind, strengthen policy dialogue and industrial coordination, maintain a fair and transparent economic and trade order, establish inclusive and open supply chain systems, and promote mutually beneficial cooperation and peaceful utilization of resources. All countries, regardless of size or strength, have the right to participate equally in global mineral cooperation and rulemaking. Certain countries must not overstate security concerns, politicize or weaponize issues related to energy and critical minerals. They should refrain from adopting a Cold War mentality, fostering bloc confrontations, or creating exclusive, geopolitically motivated small circles. The formation and the development of global industrial and supply chains are the outcomes of economic globalization and market forces, with historical and objective foundations. Political manipulation or artificial intervention will only further disrupt global markets, undermine international cooperation, and ultimately be counterproductive for those who engage in such practices. President, China is the world's largest producer, consumer, and trader of mineral products. It has consistently been committed to responsible mining, open trade, and mutually beneficial cooperation, playing a constructive and a positive role in the supply of critical minerals. At the 20th G20 Leaders Summit, China proposed the International Economic and Trade Cooperation Initiative on green mining, aimed at promoting the green transformation and sustainable development of the global mining sector and jointly safeguarding a stable, mutually beneficial, fair and equitable global green mining production and supply chain. China welcomes all parties to actively participate in and support this initiative. China will continue to advance high-level opening up with unwavering determination, fully leverage its mineral reserves and technological strength, enhance dialogue and communication, foster complementarity with more countries, and build a closer network of cooperation, thereby making greater contributions to the stability of global industrial and supply chains. I thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. And let me welcome you, Secretary Wright, to the Security Council and thank the US for putting this important issue on our agenda. I also thank USG DiCarlo for briefing us today. Colleagues, as has been said already, competition for natural resources has long been a driver of conflict. And yet, lasting economic growth and prosperity requires expansion of supply and a successful transition to sustainable sources of clean and renewable energy. Critical minerals are central to the global energy transition, economic resilience, and modern technology. I'll make three further points. First, as supply chains for critical minerals become more concentrated, competition for these resources is driving geopolitical tension and creating exposure to coercion and disruption. Global demand is rising rapidly. Meeting this demand has the potential to reshape economies, but also requires responsible management of risks. Minerals-driven growth is not automatically stabilizing, and in fragile contexts, mineral revenues can finance armed groups and military actors, deepen corruption, and undermine trust in institutions. And Ms. DiCarlo highlighted some of the issues that arise, for example, in the Great Lakes region. And yet, when done well, critical minerals development can and should be responsible and sustainable, supporting growth, jobs, and environmental protection in producing countries. Second, conflict-sensitive investment in critical minerals is essential. This means understanding conflict dynamics, maintaining dialogue with communities, and, where appropriate, formalizing artisanal mining. Any shift to industrial mining must ensure communities see the benefits through jobs, energy access, and economic opportunity. Good governance is also an essential element. Mineral development must respect national ownership, ensure transparent contracts and fair taxation, and apply high environmental, social, and governance standards. Benefit sharing must be clear and tangible. Third, partnerships are key to meeting global demand in a responsible, sustainable way. The United Kingdom is committed to a partnerships-based approach to promoting responsible, diversified supply chains. We are proud to be helping international partners leverage their mineral resources for inclusive growth. For example, the Vale-based metals refinery in Wales plays a critical role within a globally integrated network, processing nickel that originates from Indonesia and Canada and undergoes intermediary processing in Japan or Canada before being imported to the UK for final processing. Partnerships with the private sector are also essential for mobilizing capital at scale to unlock responsible investment in critical minerals. Coordination across sovereign funds, export credits, and private finance can help manage risk and ensure that today's supply solutions do not become tomorrow's conflict drivers. The United Kingdom stands ready to work with partners to ensure critical minerals are a source of stability and not insecurity. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom. I give the floor to the representative of Latvia.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, I wish to thank the United States, the President of the Council, for convening this meeting, and I extend my appreciation to you, Secretary Wright, for being with us today. And I also thank Under-Secretary General DiCarlo for her briefing. Energy and international security are intrinsically linked. For most people, the cost of global instability becomes visible at the gas station or in their monthly energy bill. Also, rising energy prices lead to higher food prices, with direct consequences for food security for the most vulnerable populations. Conflict and natural resources are similarly connected. Countries rich in natural resources know all too well that a blessing can often become a curse. So, Mr. President, allow me to make 3 points. First, in war and conflict, energy can be both target and weapon. Civilian energy infrastructure is often a cynical target of choice. Energy supplies can become powerful tools of coercion. And this is starkly illustrated by Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, where Russia is systematically attacking Ukraine's energy system, depriving civilians from electricity and heating in the coldest winter, recklessly targeting nuclear power plants. For Russia, energy also serves another purpose. It fills its war chest. And for decades, it has used energy supplies to exert political pressure on countries that have developed and over-reliance on them. And for that, there is a solution. It is stopping such dependencies, as my country has done, diversification of supplies by strengthening ties with reliable suppliers and deploying renewable energy. The latter serves a dual objective of promoting energy security and addressing climate change, which is one of the defining challenges of our time. This brings me to my second point. The clean energy transition and digital transformation that embraces advanced technologies increase global demand for critical minerals. We all know that. Securing access to these minerals is marked by competition. But competition should follow rules too. Dominant possessions should not be abused. Resilient critical mineral supply chains need to be based on the principles of transparency, diversification, reliability, and sustainable mining practices. Critical minerals should enable a transformative future, not perpetuate conflict, and this is my final point. In too many places, ruthless competition for natural resources has been a driver of armed conflict, crime, and corruption. Instead of sustainable livelihoods, it often results in hazardous labor conditions. Instead of sound stewardship of land, it leads to extensive deforestation and loss of biodiversity. For critical mineral production to benefit local sustainable and resilient development, it requires appropriate legal and tax frameworks, investments, and good governance. Resource-rich developing countries need to be supported in this regard. And USG DiCarlo described in her briefing what the UN system efforts are in that sense. Adherence to established environmental, social, and government standards and due diligence frameworks, such as Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative or OECD due diligence guidance, should be promoted among governments and the private sector alike. And meaningful engagement of local communities is essential to protect their rights, address grievances, and ensure accountability. Mr. President, the challenge is not new, but the urgency is pressing. Commitment to faithful implementation of already established standards can help mitigate critical mineral supply chain risks. And it should be recognized that the race for profit at the expense of the local population, their economic prosperity, human rights, and environmental sustainability eventually backfires. And when communities thrive, supply chains endure. So let us make responsible action, all of us, the standard, not the exception. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Latvia for that statement. I give the floor to the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you. Mr. President, Secretary Wright, we welcome your presence and presiding over this council session. And we also thank USG DiCarlo for her useful briefing. Access to affordable, reliable, and sustainable energy is essential for development, stability, and prosperity. The global transition toward renewable energy, electric mobility, battery storage, advanced manufacturing, digital infrastructure, and grid modernization has sharply increased the demand for critical minerals. This upsurge has generated new geopolitical and geoeconomic pressures. And if not managed responsibly, competition over natural resources can affect supply chains, aggravate tensions, undermine sovereignty, and contribute to instability. Experience shows that where mineral wealth intersects with weak governance, entrenched poverty, and external interference, the risks of instability increase. In several conflict-affected settings, illicit extraction, trafficking networks, and opaque financial flows have fueled armed conflict and violence, and weakened state institutions and deprived populations of legitimate revenues. The scramble for natural resources and its linkage to conflict and instability is therefore not new. and it will be good to change course. Pakistan believes that natural resources must serve as instruments of economic development and shared prosperity, and not coercion or conflict. Mr. President, this applies equally to water, the most critical of natural resources. In particular, shared water resources are indispensable for sustaining life and for sustainable development and prosperity. We reject the weaponization of water to choke this lifeline for lower riparians, also threatening regional peace, security, and stability. Pakistan itself is confronted with water terrorism by India that has resorted to unilateral and unlawful action of putting in abeyance the Indus Waters Treaty in violation of international law and the provisions of that treaty. The international community must impress upon India to return to full compliance with the Indus Waters Treaty, which, by the way, remains valid and in force as per the August 2025 award of the Court of Arbitration. Mr. President, the production and trade in critical minerals must respect national ownership, domestic priorities, and the right of developing countries to pursue value addition and industrialization with a view to transforming them from mere raw material exporters to integrated hubs for processing and refining. The concentration of critical minerals supply chains, price volatility, export restrictions, and geopolitical competition are creating new vulnerabilities in global energy and economic security framework. Efforts to secure supply must not devolve into bloc politics, economic coercion, or exclusionary arrangements, thereby ensuring that supply chain diversification does not become a tool for geopolitical containment. Fragmentation of global markets will undermine both energy transition objectives and collective security. In this context, we would like to emphasize the following points. First, we must reaffirm the right of peoples to permanent sovereignty over their natural resources, which remain a foundational principle of international law, also enshrined in General Assembly Resolution 1803. All partnerships in the critical mineral sector must be cooperative and not exploitative. Respect national ownership, ensure transparent contractual arrangements, and align with host countries' development strategies. Second, in order to prevent the exploitation of mineral-producing countries and regions, particularly in fragile and conflict-affected settings, support their capacity building for strengthening domestic regulatory institutions, combating illicit financial flows, ensuring environmental safeguards, and promoting equitable benefit sharing with local communities. Third, promote equitable participation in global value chains. Developing countries must be enabled to move beyond extraction towards processing, refining, and downstream manufacturing. Technology transfers, skill development, and responsible investment are essential to avoid perpetuating structural imbalances. Fourth, to preserve an open, predictable, non-discriminatory international trading system. Supply chain diversification should enhance resilience and not entrench divisions. Multilateral cooperation rather than unilateral measures remains the most credible path to energy security. Fifth, ensure that private sector and global corporations participate in the endeavor responsibly. Investor-state dispute settlement procedures must be fair and equitable without causing any undue burden on developing nations. Mr. President, in this era of technological transformation, the governance of energy and critical minerals must remain firmly anchored in the UN Charter and international law. Managed in accordance with these principles, these resources can drive sustainable development and shared global prosperity. Mismanaged or exploited, they risk deepening inequalities and intensifying geopolitical tensions. Pakistan is committed to the responsible development of its energy and mineral resources. The government of Pakistan has launched targeted initiatives to accelerate exploration and development of critical minerals. We are strengthening our regulatory frameworks, modernizing geological mapping, improving licensing transparency, and promoting environmentally responsible mining practices. Our objective is to ensure that our resource potential translates into industrial growth and social development. Pakistan stands ready to work with all members and beyond to ensure that critical minerals become catalysts for sustainable development, progress, and stability. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Pakistan for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Mr. President, the topic chosen by the presidency for today's meeting is one of the most acute issues on the international agenda. The desire for enrichment at the expense of the resources of other countries has posed threats of conflicts and wars, and this for centuries. Humanity has not managed to cure this illness so far. Today, we've been invited to discuss, in particular, one of the key resources of the future, so-called critical minerals. Yet clearly, the topic of conflicts, for instance, in a rush for oil and gas, has not been exhausted. And if you delve a little bit deeper, when human lives were also considered resources, well, we believe that the discussion on the repercussions of the slave trade and colonialism is not over yet. But let's revert back to minerals. Critical minerals are not simply a good or a resource. This is part of the foundation of the emerging economic order. Today, many spoke about this already. Swift technological progress, the development of artificial intelligence, and the rise in energy consumption, including by data processing centers, are driving galloping demand for critical raw materials. And what are our Western colleagues saying on this topic? Proclamations about the need to ensure traceability and transparency of supply chains. What does this mean in practice? Well, quite a few countries have seen for themselves in cases with other resources. They've seen that in practice, there are attempts to establish external control over the sector by ensuring Western consumers are locked into supply chains and by imposing calibrated pricing. At the same time, the human rights and climate agendas are widely used so as to divide states into judges and the accused, and to then demand the latter, the accused, to sell off their resources for a pittance. As for the G7, it unabashedly calls itself a buyers' club. What's particularly telling, as an example of all of these approaches, is the G7 Thematic Plan of Action, adopted in June of last year in Canada. In that plan, you can clearly see the colonial logic of securing a resource base for extracting countries. In exchange for being included in Western algorithms, these resource-rich countries are given the all-too-familiar standard promises of capital investment and technology transfer. Yet genuine investment was and continue to be and will be funneled solely to infrastructure, which is used to export the commodities in question.
Given heightened competition over minerals, the West is trying to build value-added creation capacities in their own jurisdictions. Meanwhile, the technologies they provide are catch-up technologies at best. Against this backdrop, this thematic Security Council meeting is an unambiguous signal to resource-rich countries. A signal about what awaits them if they are recalcitrant in negotiations. Having said that, there are key business or so-called business instruments that have already been implemented or are awaiting in the wings. I'm referring to interference in internal affairs of states and ways of toppling inconvenient regimes, unilateral restrictive measures circumventing the Security Council, as well as other violations of international law, which are incompatible with the principles of international relations on an equal footing, as well as the principles of free trade and fair competition. Let me underscore. Reproducing colonial models built on the seizure of resource rents without fully fledged development of the states where the extraction takes place, this reproduction risks not only entrenching, but also heightening many times over the potential for global conflict. Adding a new front for confrontation on top of the battle for conventional resources. Access to reliable energy sources and energy security guarantees are the foundation for economic development, social stability, and prosperity. By contrast, turning energy into a weapon of geopolitical and economic pressure nullifies technological achievements. Regrettably, we are bearing witness to how enemies are being harshly eliminated. Enemies in the energy sphere. We're bearing witness to unilateral sanctions being imposed on energy companies in other countries, competitor countries. Critically important transboundary infrastructure has been sabotaged. And there are other illicit activities, including seizure of vessels in violation of the freedom of the high seas. This is breaking down energy supply chains, the erosion of contractual obligations, an increase in the cost of living. It is also intensifying global and regional instability. Countries are compelled to search for new ways of ensuring their energy security. However, it is possible to deviate from this scenario. And many spoke about this today in this chamber. This is possible if we respect the principles of equal partnerships, factoring in the interests of all participants. If we were to do that, this sphere could foster sustainable development and the prosperity of states. First and foremost, states belonging to the global majority, including states where the extraction takes place. Mineral wealth should be the bedrock of socio-economic stability and development. It's necessary to respect the sovereign rights of states to independently decide on their model for regulating and for extracting their own natural resources throughout the entire value chain, from exploration, prospecting, to the end product arriving on the market. Such a state of affairs can be achieved through equal participation of critical raw material supplier states in global value chains. This, in turn, requires a long overdue reform of international trade rules, as well as a revision of investment agreement architecture. The aim being to ensure that the states where the extraction takes place can not only effectively develop their own processing capabilities, but also for them to be able to get access to cutting-edge technologies and financing under conditions of genuine partnership. In light of the above, we welcome the 2025 discussion of such approaches, which was held at the BRICS Summit in Rio de Janeiro. There, countries agreed to bolster cooperation on extraction and processing of critical resources. The Russian Federation is responsibly participating in international economic relations.
We're one of the biggest exporters of energy resources. Our contribution to global energy security, is significant. We are actively cooperating with those who are interested in mutually respectful cooperation. We are promoting the aforementioned approaches in various international fora. We deem unacceptable politicized attempts to downplay the importance and role of hydrocarbons in the global energy mix. What's equally unacceptable is forced abandonment of conventional fuel sources in favor of green protectionism. At the same time, we will continue to place the priority on the need to ensure access to inexpensive, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy sources, with due regard for environmental factors. We recognize just how relevant it is for us to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. On this, we are in favor of the principle of technological neutrality. That is, no discrimination against certain energy sources if energy sources have equivalent greenhouse gas emission characteristics. This includes natural gas and nuclear power. I thank you for your attention.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of Somalia.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, Somalia wishes to thank the United States for convening this meeting and Secretary Wright for presiding over today's important discussion. We also extend our appreciation to Undersecretary General DiCarlo for her comprehensive briefing. Today, the world stands at a historical crossroad. The global energy landscape is shifting rapidly from an oil-based system to one increasingly anchored in critical minerals. It's important to recognize that the majority of these reserves are concentrated in the global south, especially across the African continent, and it's a source of insecurity and underdevelopment. These minerals are now indispensable to the technologies that will shape the future: renewable energy, advanced manufacturing, and digital innovation. Yet, as history has shown, a shift in resources does not guarantee stability or prosperity. This transition does not simply trade old risks for new ones. It brings a new era of complexity and volatility. Already, competition for critical minerals is generating tensions, with resource-rich regions, especially in Africa, too often enduring cycles of instability, environmental degradation, and limited local benefit. Mr. President, for Africa, this debate is more than market dynamics. It's about sovereignty, it's about stability, it's about ensuring our people's right to economic opportunity. Africa holds roughly 1/3 of the world's critical mineral reserves. But for too long, Africa's wealth and that of the global south has not translated into tangible improvements in the lives of the people. We cannot allow the extractive models of the past focus on the removal and the export of raw materials with little local value added to be repeated. History makes clear extraction without genuine development and local ownership breeds grievance and instability, not peace. For resources to support peace, their development must honor the sovereignty and aspirations for African nations and all countries of the global south. Mr. President, the Security Council has a vital role in guiding this new era of mineral competition toward the foundation for sovereignty, prosperity, and lasting peace. We believe 3 priorities are essential. First, there must be a collective commitment to transparency and responsible supply chains. Weak international standards enable illicit trade and exploitation. undermining sovereignty and fueling insecurity. Only through robust transparency, due diligence, and fair benefit sharing can minerals wealth serve both local communities and global stability. Second, we must encourage ethical public-private partnership. While the private sector drives investment and innovation, it must do so with respect for human rights and a long-term commitment to local development. Sustainable partnership that builds skills and industries in producing countries are key to resilient and inclusive economies. And my final point, Mr. President, regional and international cooperation must be deepened and made more equitable. The African Union's African Mining Vision, the African Commodity Strategy, and the African Green Minerals Strategy form the African roadmap for turning resource wealth into engines of sustainable development. Supporting these frameworks through harmonized regulations, infrastructure investment, and knowledge sharing will help turn volatility into opportunity and ensure that the benefits are widely shared and sustainable peace is achieved. To conclude, Mr. President, the future of energy and technology will not be determined by access to minerals alone, but by the values and the choices guiding their extraction as well as their use. The Security Council has a unique opportunity to ensure that the race for resources becomes a foundation for lasting peace, prosperity, and dignity for all nations, especially those in Global South and Africa, where so much of the world's mineral future will be decided. We remain committed in that endeavor. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Somalia for that statement. I give the floor to the representative of Colombia.
Señor Presidente.
Mr. President, I wish to thank the United States for the initiative of convening this relevant discussion. I also thank Undersecretary General DiCarlo for the valuable information and thoughts that she shared. A discussion in this Council on energy, critical minerals, and security presents us with an inescapable reality. The climate crisis is an existential threat for humanity. The direct consequence of having built human progress on the indiscriminate exploitation of fossil fuels. For Colombia, this discussion falls within a broader context, that of needing to move towards peace with nature, reconciling socioeconomic systems and the ecological limits of the planet. That means the urgent decarbonization of the global economy and a just transition towards clean energies. But that transition cannot repeat the logics of extraction and inequality that marked the fossil era. The leap towards low-carbon technologies has greatly increased the demand for critical minerals, generating new environmental, social, and geopolitical tensions. Those minerals cannot become a new cause of subordination for the countries that possess them. They must first and foremost serve the sovereign development of their peoples. The nations that are rich in these resources must have priority access to and the primary use of them in order to transform their own economies, to close historic gaps, and to participate in dignified conditions in the decarbonized global economy. Colombia believes in the potential of critical minerals as key elements for achieving sustainable development. They can and must be turned into direct benefits for the territories that produce them and the people that live there, including indigenous peoples and peoples of African descent.